In the year 434 AD, a man rose to power who would become the most feared name in all of Europe. The Romans called him Flagellum Dei, the Scourge of God, and they believed he was divine punishment sent to destroy their empire. His name was Attila the Hun, and for nearly 20 years he terrorized the ancient world, razing cities, slaughtering armies, and bringing the mighty Roman Empire to its knees. But Attila's story begins not in glory, but in the harsh, windswept steppes of Central Asia, where survival meant mastering the horse, the bow, and the art of war. The Huns were a nomadic people, horsemen who lived by herding animals and raiding their neighbors. They had no written language, no cities, no permanent homes. They moved constantly across the vast grasslands of the Eurasian steppes, and they were feared by everyone who encountered them. Roman historians described them as barely human, saying they were born on horseback and lived like animals. But this was propaganda born of terror. The Huns were formidable warriors with sophisticated tactics and unmatched skill with the composite bow, a weapon that could pierce armor at 200 yards. Attila was born around 406 AD, somewhere in the territory we now call Hungary. His name may have meant Little Father or Universal Ruler, depending on the dialect. His father was Munzuk, brother to the two kings who ruled the Huns jointly, Oktar and Ruga. Among the Huns, leadership was not passed by birthright alone. Kings were chosen for their strength, their cunning, and their ability to command loyalty, and Attila would prove he possessed all three. As a boy, Attila learned to ride before he could walk. He learned to shoot a bow from horseback at full gallop. He learned to survive on mare's milk and raw meat when necessary. Hunnic children were trained for war from the moment they could sit on a horse. They slept on the ground, endured freezing winters and scorching summers, and learned that weakness meant death. But Attila also learned something the other Huns did not. He learned about the Romans. As a young man, Attila was sent as a hostage to the Roman court, a common practice to ensure peace between the Huns and Rome. And there he saw everything: the marble palaces, the golden treasures, the elaborate feasts. But he also saw the corruption, the weak emperors controlled by scheming advisors, the armies that had grown soft and undisciplined, and Attila understood that Rome, for all its wealth and power, was rotting from within, waiting to be conquered. In 434 AD, King Ruga died, and power passed to his nephews, Attila and his older brother Bleda. The two brothers ruled jointly at first, and their first act was to meet with Roman envoys to renegotiate tribute. The Romans had been paying the Huns gold to keep them from raiding, and Attila intended to double that payment. The meeting took place on horseback, as was the Hunnic custom. The Romans sat uncomfortably in their saddles, while Attila negotiated from a position of strength. The Romans, desperate to avoid war, agreed. The annual tribute was raised from 350 pounds of gold to 700 pounds, an enormous sum, and Attila had secured it without drawing a sword. But Attila was not satisfied with gold alone. He wanted power, he wanted land, he wanted his name to echo across history, and his brother Bleda stood in his way. In 445 AD, Bleda died under mysterious circumstances. Most historians believe Attila had him murdered. Some say he killed Bleda with his own hands during a hunting trip. Others say he hired assassins, but the result was the same. With Bleda gone, Attila became sole ruler of the Huns. and he immediately began consolidating his power. Attila united the fractured Hunnic tribes under his command. He brought Germanic tribes, Goths, Ostrogoths, Gepids, and Alans into his confederation through a combination of diplomacy, bribery, and terror. He understood that loyalty could be bought, but fear lasted longer, and he built an army unlike anything the world had ever seen. An army that moved like a storm and struck like lightning. Attila's army was a nightmare made flesh. His warriors fought on horseback, moving faster than any Roman legion could march. They used composite bows made of wood, bone, and sinew that could shoot arrows with devastating force. They would charge, fire volleys of arrows, and retreat before the enemy could respond. This hit-and-run tactic drove Roman generals mad with frustration. By the time they organized their infantry formations, the Huns were already gone, and when they did engage in close combat, Hunnic warriors wielded swords, spears, and lassos to drag enemies from their horses. But Attila's genius was not just in tactics, it was in terror. Attila understood that fear was a weapon as sharp as any blade. When his army approached a city, word of their coming spread like wildfire. Stories of the Huns drinking the blood of their enemies, of cities burned to ash with no survivors, of women and children enslaved or slaughtered. These stories were often exaggerated, but Attila did nothing to dispel them. In fact, he encouraged them. He wanted his enemies to be paralyzed with fear before he even arrived, and it worked. Cities surrendered without a fight. Armies fled at the mere rumor of his approach, and those who resisted faced total annihilation. In 441 AD, Attila turned his attention to the Eastern Roman Empire. The Romans had stopped paying tribute, claiming they needed the gold to fight the Persians. Attila took this as an insult. He invaded the Balkans with a massive army, sacking city after city. The Roman forces were no match for the speed and ferocity of the Huns. Attila's army swept through Thrace and Moesia, burning everything in their path. They destroyed over 70 cities and marched to within 20 miles of Constantinople itself. Constantinople was the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire, the greatest city in the world, home to 500,000 people, protected by the legendary Theodosian walls, triple-layered fortifications so massive that no army had ever breached them. The walls stretched for miles, studded with towers and gates, defended by thousands of soldiers. Attila knew he could not take the city by force. His Huns were cavalry, not siege engineers, so he did what he did best. He extracted a ransom. Emperor Theodosius II, watching from his palace as smoke from burning villages darkened the horizon, was terrified. His advisors begged him to negotiate, and Theodosius agreed to pay Attila 6,000 pounds of gold immediately, plus 2,100 pounds every year going forward. It was an enormous sum, enough to bankrupt entire provinces, and Attila took it and withdrew. But he had made his point. Rome was no longer the conqueror. Rome was the conquered, paying tribute to a barbarian king. But Attila was far from finished. In 447 AD, he invaded the Eastern Roman Empire again. This time, with even greater fury, he ravaged the Balkans once more, destroying cities that had barely begun to rebuild. And again, the Romans paid him to leave. Attila had turned the Eastern Roman Empire into a tributary state, and the humiliation was complete. In 450 AD, Attila received a message that would change the course of history. It came from Honoria, sister of the Western Roman Emperor Valentinian III. Honoria had been caught in a scandalous affair and was being forced into an unwanted marriage to a Roman senator. Desperate, she sent Attila a letter and her ring, asking for his help. Attila, ever the opportunist, interpreted this as a marriage proposal, and he demanded half of the Western Roman Empire as her dowry. When Valentinian refused, Attila declared war. In 451 AD, Attila invaded the Western Roman Empire with an army estimated at 500,000 men. It was the largest force he had ever commanded. Huns, Goths, Gepids, Franks, and dozens of other tribes marched together under Attila's banner. They crossed the Rhine River and swept into Gaul, modern-day France, burning and pillaging as they went. The city of Metz was destroyed completely. Reims, Strasbourg, and dozens of other cities fell, and Attila's army seemed unstoppable. But the Romans were not alone. Flavius Aetius, the greatest Roman general of his time, formed an alliance with the Visigoths, ancient enemies of Rome, but now united against a common threat. The two armies met on the Catalaunian Plains near the city of Troy. It was one of the largest and bloodiest battles in ancient history. Over 100,000 men clashed in a single day. The fighting was savage and desperate. The Visigothic king Theodoric was killed in the battle, but his son Thorismund rallied the troops and pressed the attack. For the first time in his life, Attila faced defeat. His army, bloodied and battered, retreated from the field. Historians estimate that 30,000 to 50,000 men died at the Catalaunian Plains. It was a slaughter on an unimaginable scale. Attila had been stopped, but he was not broken. He withdrew back across the Rhine, regrouped his forces, and began planning his next move. And that move would take him directly to the heart of the Western Roman Empire, to Italy itself. In 452 AD, Attila invaded northern Italy. His army crossed the Alps and descended upon the fertile plains of Lombardy. The city of Aquileia, one of the richest and most fortified cities in Italy, refused to surrender. Attila laid siege, and when the city finally fell after months of resistance, he ordered it completely destroyed. Every building burned, every inhabitant killed or enslaved. Aquileia was erased from existence, a warning to the rest of Italy. City after city fell. Padua, Verona, Brescia, Milan, all capitulated or were destroyed. Attila's army marched south, and panic swept through Italy. Emperor Valentinian III fled from his capital of Ravenna, and Rome itself prepared for the worst. The Eternal City, which had stood for over 1,000 years, faced annihilation at the hands of a barbarian king. But then, something unexpected happened. Pope Leo I, the Bishop of Rome, traveled north to meet Attila personally. It was an act of incredible courage. The Pope, unarmed and accompanied only by priests, rode out to face the man who had slaughtered hundreds of thousands. The two men met on the banks of the Po River. What was said between them remains one of history's greatest mysteries. No records of their conversation survive. But after the meeting, Attila turned his army around and withdrew from Italy. He did not sack Rome. He did not destroy the city. He simply left. Historians have debated why for centuries. Some say Pope Leo's words moved Attila to mercy. Perhaps the Pope invoked divine wrath or appealed to Attila's sense of legacy. Others say disease and famine were ravaging his army, and he could not sustain a siege of Rome. Still others believe he feared that Aetius and the Eastern Roman Emperor were preparing to attack him from behind. Whatever the reason, Attila left Italy, and Rome was spared. But Attila's story was not over. In fact, it was about to reach its strangest and most abrupt ending in 453 AD. Attila took a new wife, a young woman named Ildiko. The wedding feast was held in Attila's capital, somewhere in modern-day Hungary. Attila drank heavily, celebrating his new bride, laughing with his warriors, boasting of future conquests, and that night he went to bed. But he never woke up. The next morning, Ildiko found Attila dead in his bed. Lying in a pool of his own blood, the cause of death was recorded as a severe nosebleed. Attila, the Scourge of God, the terror of empires, the man who had brought Rome to its knees, had choked on his own blood in his sleep. Some whispered that Ildiko had murdered him. Others said it was divine justice. But most likely, it was simply a tragic and absurd end to a legendary life. His warriors, grief-stricken and enraged, cut their own faces and hair in mourning. They buried Attila in a triple coffin, one of gold, one of silver, and one of iron, symbolizing his conquests and his wealth, and to keep the location of his grave secret. They murdered everyone who knew where it was buried. The river was diverted over the burial site. To this day, Attila's tomb has never been found. And with his death, the Hunnic Empire collapsed almost immediately. Attila's sons fought each other for power. The tribes that Attila had united through fear and force of personality fractured and turned on one another. Within a few years, the Hunnic Empire was gone, scattered back into the steppes from which it had emerged. The Huns faded into history, but Attila's legacy did not. His invasions had weakened the Western Roman Empire beyond recovery, and less than 25 years after his death, Rome fell. Attila the Hun never lost his fear factor. Even centuries after his death, his name was synonymous with destruction. In medieval Europe, he was remembered as a demonic figure, the embodiment of divine wrath. But the truth was more complex. Attila was not a mindless barbarian. He was a brilliant strategist, a charismatic leader, and a man who understood power better than almost anyone in history. He ruled an empire that stretched from the Ural Mountains to the Rhine River. He brought the greatest empire in the world to its knees. He extracted millions in gold from Rome without losing a single major battle until the Catalaunian Plains. And he did it all through a combination of military genius, psychological warfare, and ruthless pragmatism. Attila the Hun was many things: a warlord, a conqueror, a diplomat, and a legend. But above all, he was the Scourge of God. And his story reminds us that empires, no matter how powerful, can be brought low by a single man with the will to challenge them. What other stories has history tried to bury? Subscribe to Ancient Echoes and discover the heroes the world forgot.